Hey, it's your old pal Limcedet again, and this time I'm going to be looking at someone else's dream content. Let's go through a couple of scenes by Bevis2 and see if we can figure out how they were made. We'll start with Mcburger Cathedral. We enter the doors. This is probably a trigger zone to detect player. The doors each have bolt connectors, and then there's likely a couple of keyframes on a timeline for the animation since it's so smooth. You can see right away there's a design philosophy of repetition of a fairly limited amount of unique sculpts. The thermo on this is 478633, and a decent chunk of that is the character ahead here and the Mcbride, which we'll see in a bit. Logic overall is minimal, so the thermo is mostly a reflection of the structure. At 47% gameplay, the whole building could probably be twice the size. The main interaction is with the glowing red cube, which causes the back wall of the cathedral to slide back, revealing the Mcbride statue, and spawning a couple dozen physical cheeseburgers that topple from the ceiling. Unfortunately, I didn't catch that on camera, but you can see the wall has disappeared, and when we get back in, cheeseburgers are strewn about the floor. That sequence presumably powers up a trigger zone, which then starts a short and bizarre cinematic that features Rammstein lyrics in a voice that is 3 octaves too high. The sky is accomplished fairly easily with a sun and sky gadget, which appears to be altered in real time during the cinematic. There is also some real-time alteration of a grade and effect gadget. I'm not sure of the exact glitch being used here, but I do see tape glitch up at the top of the screen. We receive our thematic epiphany as the burgers float up and rotate. I assume they're using movers in combination with look-at rotators to follow a tag on an invisible object rising from the ground, but there is more than one way to accomplish this. Next is a scene that got a lot of attention during the beta, Haus of Bevis. This is a large museum-like building on an island. I find it reminiscent of the Myst series in presentation. The grass is fairly easily accomplished. That is a certain fleck type of some looseness, and the sculpt is likely fairly large. There are several copies of what appears to be the same tree in this scene. These look like the standard approach to trees in Dreams so far. A sculpt for the trunk and branches, and then another for the canopy with some looseness to give the impression of leaves. It is possible these stairs are 1 or 2 pieces, and they appear to be used several times in the scene. Step by step would not be likely for a scene of this size and complexity. Here I'm taking a look at some stone-like texturing at the base of a wall. This texture looks painted on using snap to surface, but you could accomplish something similar with a sculpt of that fleck type and some impasto adjustment. The shrubbery is a sculpt with impasto turned way up. Some fleck types have more prominent emissive than others. This cinematic interlude is likely accomplished with a trigger zone, a timeline to control the sequence of events, keyframing for the turning of the statues, and then activation of the glowing flame effects. Since the Haus of Bevis text is adjusting in opacity, this must be a text displayer in scene, and it's probably using a timeline to control that along with some glow to accompany the flames. You can see after that, point of view returns to where it was at the beginning of the sequence. That means the sequence removed control of the character and transferred point of view from the character camera to a separate camera in the sequence. The climbing vines on the walls look like surface snapped paintings. This is circle fleck with looseness turned up a little. It looks like size of the brush on those is decreasing toward the end of the paint stroke. The reflection off the windows above could be done a couple of different ways. It looks like it's done with paint strokes that have shininess turned up. Metalness is also probably fairly high. One effect I like here is the vines hanging in the doorways. This was probably accomplished by sculpting the doorway out after the vines' paint strokes were laid down with surface snap. We're going to take a quick walk through part of the interior and then back outside to a walkway that extends out into the water. There's some sort of skydiver statue floating in the air here. A hallmark of this creator is the strangeness of it all. The water that extends out to the horizon is a large sculpt, probably several, with some animation turned on to simulate wave motion. To me, the walkway looks like it was made by cloning between 2 sculpts. You do this by stamping a sculpt down, cloning it with L1 and X, moving the clone to another location, and then tapping right D-pad repeatedly. The fuzzy glowing part that the pegacorn flies out of looks to be a red sculpt, a yellow sculpt, and a blue sculpt, all with looseness and glow turned up, and sunk most of the way into the black monolith. The rainbows are just paintings as effects. The question in my mind is how they managed to paint with more than one color simultaneously. To be honest, painting was not my strong suit in the beta. It could be that it's all the same effect, repositioned, resized, and recolored. I've made a sky that looks similar to this. That's what the sun looks like when you've turned sun size all the way up with a sun and sky gadget. The purplish flames here are effects with glow turned up and set to emit light. You can see right here that light emitting glow is basically an area light. Shadows are not correct on objects around it, and light is being cast on surfaces it should not affect. As a result, you want to be careful when using either one. A word on the sculpts used for the structure. They're somewhat fuzzy, but when you consider the scale of the place, it's not bad, especially in first person. It's also possible it's a stylistic choice. If you compare this with the Mcburger Cathedral scene we looked at earlier, there is a clear progression in understanding how the engine works. When we head back in, we end up in a long hallway that leads back outside. And that's a good example of how effective the global illumination can be. You have a long dark hallway and then that sliver of sunlight at the end from a hole in the rocks. And then the same thing here. It looks like this is also using a few low intensity area lights. An interesting thing to point out about the design is the number of vistas you wander into. If this isn't done intentionally, it's brilliant from an intuitive standpoint. For some reason, scenes from the beta featured a lot of glowing mushrooms. We go back inside up a series of staircases. As I said earlier, I think these are all the same one or two pieces. This is one of many wacky dialogue events that utilize what I believe is posterize. There's also tape glitch at the top and some pin cushioning. I think all of that is in great in effect. Here is Mcbride again, this time in alabaster. That material is achieved by turning shininess all the way up, and I think waxiness is as well, but I could be wrong about that. The interaction with these monoliths is probably just a trigger zone hooked up to a controller sensor set to remote control, and a text displayer for the button symbol. You can display various symbols using emoji equivalent codes in the text box. This rotunda is 12-sided and extremely precise, so I would assume that the kaleidoscope tool was involved in its construction, since angles not divisible by 45 are not easy to achieve with any precision otherwise. I wish I had the game in front of me so I could try to recreate this. I also wish I had a video of it being created because I'm not positive how it was done right off the top of my head. As far as I understand it, future plans for this are to continue to fill it with bizarre sculptures like this one. The part coming up is probably the most impressive and also has some elements I'm not real sure about. This map of the world on the dome is likely painted using Surface Snap. Seriously, no idea how they drew it that accurately. It must have taken forever. This rotunda also has something like 32 sides. Pretty much has to be kaleidoscope tool, but I'm not positive exactly how. Same for the pattern on the floor. It looks like spray paint with the kaleidoscope tool. Some of the intervening patterns look like they may have been done by hand. They're fairly accurate but not quite as precise. Overall, really impressive. Good luck trying to replicate that. One more look at the front of the building, and hats off to Bevis2 for a masterful creation. One or two more videos like this and then hopefully it will be time for the early access. I'll see you next time.